But if it's still possible, may our Godfather and His Christ forgive them, because they must not know what they're doing. But if they do know what they're doing, then, then deal with them according to your word, O Father. You know what I'm saying? Speaking of those dissemblers, liars, and haters out there that are trying to confuse and twist the message of Lion of Judah Society and of I Ras Iadonis. As we said before, if there's any mistake or error in what is being taught, this is my fault. Blame me, I'm responsible. If there's any truth in what we are teaching, all glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. You understand that. Now let's go on with atonement. What does atonement mean? Now this is, I think, the third or the fourth part of this teaching. So if you're hearing this, there are other parts that lead up to this. So we may refer to it and you may want more information. So get the entire teaching on atonement. Is very important for us as Rastafari to understand or understand what does atonement mean, and why a time like this, September 17th, the evening time, 2010, which is the eve or the eve before the day of Yom Kippur, you understand why Astesrio Yesariet Ken is important to us in a Christological sense, and why the true teaching of the Orthodox Church, the Tawahido teaching of the Ethiopic Church, is a fully digested, I'm speaking about the true teaching, not all the practices that are going on today. You understand? Because there's a lot of apostasy that has crept in. Many of the Bahitawi and the Debteras have spoken out. Many have gotten persecuted, have gotten arrested, and even some have gotten killed for speaking out against the apostasy. These are the saints, the Kedusan of Abba Qiddus, that have gotten martyred because they too, you understand, are speaking that prophetical message, you understand, and warning and rebuke and warning the people about this apostasy. But the same thing is happening to many of I as well. So may the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit protect us and keep us always. Amen. So let's touch on atonement, the further teaching of atonement, and this is based on this particular high holy day, this Senbet, this end of the Hebrew holy days, this seventh and fulfillment of the Hebrew holy days, or holidays as they would say, or the times that are our holy set apart times. But see, it's not just Hebrew or so-called Jewish. When you understand the true roots of the Ethiopic Church, the true roots of the Ethiopic Church is Hebraic. But our enemies hated that. For years they've hated that. And they've tried to fight against the Ethiopic Church for its Hebraic roots and for its connection to the truth. You understand? And some apostates have crept in that have brought in counterfeit ideologies and images and teachings subtly into the Ethiopic Church. And this is where the root of this spiritual warfare, or this war in heaven, this is where the root of that, you understand, the root of those weeds have been sown among the wheat. That's the fulfillment of Christ's parable, of the parables of the Moshiach. So as we move forward on atonement, Astes Rio Sariet Kapar or Kapur or Kafar, the biblical use and the meaning of the word must be sharply distinguished from its use in theology. This is from the Schofield Study Bible Notes and annotated by I and compared diligently to His Imperial Majesty's Abba Qiddus to the Bible of Haile Selassie, the Amharic Bible of His Imperial Majesty. It says the first thing is that the biblical use and the meaning of the word, atonement, must be sharply distinguished from its use in theology. In theology, according to theology, it is a term which covers the whole, the entire, the fullness, as we would say, of the sacrificial and the redemptive work of the Christos, of Ha-Mashiach, and we are speaking of the Messiah, the Son, the Messiah. In the Old Testament, or the Belui Kidan, atonement is the English word used to translate the Hebrew words, which mean cover or coverings or to cover. Now, atonement, or what many of us have said and familiar with, at-one-ment, is therefore not a translation of the Hebrew, but it's a purely and it's entirely a theological concept. In other words, it is an interpolation, well-meaning, but it's not a literal translation. You understand, of that, but the translators have brought this word at-one-ment as a theological idea. Now, the Levitical offerings covered, literally they covered the Chatiyat of the Beta Israel. They covered the sin nature of Israel until and in anticipation and with the expectation of the Meskel, the expectation of the cross, the true cross of Christ. But they did not take away, they could not take away the Chatiyat, the sin nature. And the teaching, this is according to Ibrawian of the book of Hebrews, the epistles of Hebrews, chapter 10, verse 4. Now those sins, it did not take away those Chatiyat, that sin, or even the real guilt of the bedel or the wrongdoings. Because sin is singular and the wrongdoings are many, but there's only wrongdoings because of the sin, the Chatiyat nature, which is a singularity of Satan embedded in humanity, which the cross of Christos takes away to those who receive it, be-amen or be-aman, you understand, in true and faithful witness, admittance. Now, these were the sins done aforetime. These were the Chatiyat, or the sin, or the bedel that was done previously. They were covered, meantime, by the Levitical sacrifices. So the Levitical sacrifices of the Old Testament, this is what distinguishes the Old Testament, which was a shadow, and the fulfillment, the one that cast the shadow because of the light, you understand, has come in the Hadith, or the Brit Hadasha, in that new covenant. So the Levitical sacrifices that were offered, they only covered, they did not do away with the nature. They could not do away the bulls, the blood of bulls and goats and animals. Could not do away. That's why in Rastafari there's this consciousness, somewhat embedded and somewhat like innate, but not fully understood. You understand? Apart from the teachings of the King of Kings, why we have this anti-animal flesh debtors. Why there's this anti-debtors and slaying and killing and slaughtering animals. You understand why there's this aversion? That's what the word I was looking for. Why is there this aversion, you understand, to the eating of meat and to flesh? You understand, among the Rastafari, it is based on the principles of this high holy day, or the principles fulfilled in the atonement of the Moshiach, or the true cross of the Christ, which was able to take away or put away the Chatiyat nature to those who yemiyaminut. You understand? To those who admit in it, who admit in Him. In other words, those who are properly aligned based on faith. You understand? Or the amen, the imnet. In other words, so these were the sins, or the bedel that were done, the wrongdoings done aforetime, covered meantime by the Levitical sacrifices, which Elohim, He passed over them. He passed over them, and we explained before, and this is based on Romans chapter 3, verse 25. We explained before, the example we used before, it's like a parent has a child, and the child did something wrong, and the child comes to you, or when you question them, they own up that they did something wrong, they're sorry for what they did and everything, and you say, you know what, we're not going to talk about this right now. I want you to go to your room and do this and such and such. You know, you send them away, and then you don't bring it up again anymore, and you notice the child doesn't do that anymore. You know what I'm saying? Because if they do that anymore, then you are in your rights, well within your rights, to punish them. But now, if you pass over, you could punish them for the first time they did it. But you notice that maybe they're contrite, they have contrition, they have some sadness, there's some guilt, there's some recognition, they're maturing. You understand? They're becoming an adult, a waki. They're growing up. Yehovah saying, so, because they owned up, so you allow them, you say, go to your room, I'm very disappointed in you, and so forth, but you don't bring it up again. That's an example of what it means when it says that Elohim, Baruch Hu Ha Elohim, the King of Kings in spirit and in truth, he passed over. He passed over, for which the passing over Elohim's righteousness was never vindicated. It was never vindicated, his righteousness in passing over these, until and in the true cross, the Eunetenya Meskel, IYESUS Christos, Yahoshua HaMashiach was, quote, set forth. He set forth a propitiation. Now that's another word that kind of gets joined to this. So some say atonement, some say propitiation, some say reconciliation, and it's important to understand these terms and how they relate. But if it's still possible,